Monday, May 11th. Roll call, please.
Chair Bussey.
Here.
Alder Holmquist.
Here.
Mr. Dorschel.
Here.
Ms. Devenish. Here. Mr. Ganzer.
Here.
Mr. Kugel.
Here.
Mr. Stein.
Here.
Mr. Hamburg.
Here. Do we have approval of the minutes of April 13th, 2015? Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Edits, corrections, deletions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Appearances. Is there anyone here who wishes to appear in an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close the appearance section. We're going to do this a little out of order. We're going to move to 6, new business, which would be consideration of action on 2 off-premise sign permits for Starion Financial, 5900 Gishold. Did I pronounce that right, John? Thank you. 5900 Gishold Drive to be located at the intersection of West Broadway and Gishold Drive and on the Beltline frontage near Gishold. Do you want to come up and? Sure. Welcome.
Good to be back in Monona. I am John Hecht. I'm the market president for the Madison area for Starion Financial. And as you'll recall, WPS Community Bank, where I worked previously, was acquired by Starion Financial on April 10th. And the purpose tonight, as you've seen from the letter and the materials, is that WPS Community Bank did have some off-premise signage located out by Gishold Drive, out by the frontage road toward Broadway, and also what I would call a large monument sign out by the Beltline. Both of those signage locations really helped a lot of our customers find the bank. And the big problem that we had is one of visibility, that from Broadway you really can't see the bank, the drive-up facilities. And so the purpose tonight is really one to reface the signs in particular with the Starion name and logo so that our customers can continue to find the bank. We've had a lot of situations where Starion customers, which were from the Middleton and Sun Prairie office, are now taking advantage of the Monona location just due to convenience. So again, because of visibility and because of the brand, it's not one that has a lot of brand awareness. And for that reason, we believe that the refacing is very critical to the success of the branch location here in Monona. So,
Thank you. You want to hang there, because I know that the next item we'll work on too. So, Sonia?
These are both off-premise advertising signs that require Plan Commission approval, and then additionally, the one out by Broadway was only approved for a temporary period originally by the Plan Commission in 2008 for 3 years. So that's why they're here tonight. And staff recommendation is for approval as outlined in the staff report.
we do have tonight also Jim Miller from Wisconsin Sign and Graphics. He is the signage contractor engaged by Starion. Jim, I don't know if you have any specific technical comments you'd like to make with respect to the refacing of the signs themselves.
Well, basically the one thing for sure.
Yeah, Jim, if they're recording it, so if you can come to the mic, it'd be appreciated.
One thing to find out in regards to, well, first off, Broadway sign, that we're only doing the top, basically half of it is 22 inches by 8 feet long, and obviously with the rebranding of that, just in the same manner as we had done the two directional signs that are in front of the bank right now. We basically overlaid the material. It was the same exact construction and everything. We're not changing the lighting. Then on the Beltline side, what Starion has opted to do is actually drop the side that would be coming from the east. Okay, it would be the west elevation of the sign heading east. And only do the single one side which would be the east elevation of the sign. So basically the traffic heading towards the west. And so that is the one big thing that I guess when you consider the square footage of the total sign, because it is a small sign, even it's 163 square feet on each side. That would what we would do is on that west elevation, would cover it, take off the letters. The facial letters on that particular sign were built into the metal, and so we're actually going to cut those out of there and then reface a whole thin sheet of aluminum. It'll match the color, accordingly to what was approved originally, and so the back side will be just seamless in that respect. The front side with the letters, we are taking those off and putting new channel letters. Right now, the letters that are on the existing fascia is about 3 inches deep. We will be doing a 4-inch channel letter due to illumination. The illumination inside the sign that illuminates the sign right now is fluorescent. All these channel letters, the channel letters that we are putting on the logo, is all lit with white LEDs. It'll bring the consumption down in the power usage for that sign also.
Thank you.
So basically that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Commission members, comments? Robert?
I don't know how we allow an off-premise sign for an end cap user in a building a block away over on the Beltline. I just don't understand it. When we approved it before, we did it under the auspices that this was WPS's campus. They have whatever, they got 20-some acres, whatever it is. They had enough separate lots that they had the right to be able to put these big signs up. And when we approved the bank, there's a number of us that are here that when we approved that, well, we'll do a WPS sign, we'll allow them to put the bank on the WPS sign, but we approved them for WPS on their campus. We're talking about a multi-tenant building with an end cap user now saying that's okay to have a sign like that on Broadway. I think that truly is Pandora's box of off-premises signage, which we usually don't allow. We had made an exception because of the size of the campus and because it was WPS. As far as the other one, we did do it on a 3-year basis. I see it's been a little longer than that now. And one of the caveats, and we did that, is WPS agreed to forego any other signage along Broadway to be able to put that sign up. So if we were to approve anything like that, if we're of the mind to approve it, we at the very minimum would have to have WPS's sign off that they're willing to forego any signage on Broadway, because that was a condition of that sign.
That's
Able
right,
to
item
justify
6B.
that one.
That's 6B, right?
No, aren't they both under the same one? No, they're both under A.
Okay.
There are 2 signs under A. And our rationale when we approved the one on Broadway was that it was a new location. I remember when we talked about it with you, it was a new location and nobody really knew how to get there yet, so we put it up there so people could figure out how to get there, and we did the 3 years so they had long enough time to get there. It could be argued they do know how to get there right now. I understand you're changing your name and your brand. I'd like to hear what everyone thinks about that sign. I don't think it's end of the world if we give them another temporary permit for that, but I think it's a huge leap to allow an off-premise a sign of that size on the Beltline for a partial user of a multi-tenant building a block away. I mean, I'm saying it like that because you can look at the ramifications that this could have, this action. It was done specifically and crafted for WPS because of their large presence there and the massive land they had. And for the land they had, the land mass, and they had it divided into lots, and I think these signs, so correct me if I'm wrong, they got to be 500 feet apart or whatever, something like that. They could do it because of their property, and still they had the ability to ask for that sign. So we asked them to do WPS, we let them add the bank to it. This is a totally different game right now.
Mr. Ganser?
Can we assume, John, that WPS still owns those 2 signs and they're letting Starion use them, or has Starion purchased them?
Yeah, actually, it's a good question, Dale, and that's an important topic. When we made the decision to look at those signs, the bank actually incurred a capital investment. The large sign out by the Beltline was approximately $42,000 that we spent primarily, as a direction finding to help people locate, the proper turn. I would also share with the commission that because we have customers now coming from other locations within the Starion local market presence, that it is still important to have that, wayfinding and directional signage. if they're going to be coming from the west side or from the east side, since they have locations in Middleton and Sun Prairie. We are already seeing customers inquiring, using it, and it is increasing. I think it's still important that we still have that direction finding, and the bank did have, and Starion did purchase the signage, $42,000 alone for the large sign out toward the Beltline. That was a significant investment, particularly for a newer bank that was predicated, on the idea that we're going to have a lot of people going westbound. We wanted them to get off. At that time was the Southtown exit. Now it's West Broadway exit, and it is an important wayfinding sign to help them then to direct them into the further sign on Broadway near the frontage coming into the Gishel property.
I don't imagine this has been thought through by Starion, but what would there be? I mean, your letter starts out that this location probably will cease in January of 18. I don't have a problem extending the location of these signs through their current lease, but I think Mr. Homburg is correct. That certainly cannot go with that tenant space after January of 18. In other words, Starion can't then in turn sell them to the subway that's going in there or that kind of thing. And then
The current lease
be removed at that point.
The current lease does expire in January of 2018. It is Starion's current intention to look for possible alternate locations within Monona because they do recognize the convenience with the central proximity of the Monona location. At that time, if that was a concern of the commission, certainly to try to extend some temporary approval through at least that lease date would be a reasonable compromise at this point, pending further decision on alternate locations if they choose to abandon, and they've even talked about building another site here within the Monona area at some point. So that is a topic that we're currently exploring right now.
Griff?
I share Mr. Homburg's concern about the sign on the Beltline. I think actually the Plan Commission encouraged WPS to consider a sign on Broadway because it resolved some of the other problems that we were involved in at that time, and we recognized that the WPS Bank needed some additional wayfinding guidance because of its presence off of Broadway. So I don't feel, I feel the one on Broadway would be all right. I would also be willing to go along with the idea that there would be just a 3-year extension of the two signs. If in fact, since Starion is considering a totally different location, and I agree that it should not just go along with
the land?
Any subsequent tenant.
Yeah. Mr. Homburg?
I'm confused by that. You said you agree with the concern about the one on the Beltline, but then you'd agree to a 3-year extension and leave the one on the Beltline?
Well,
because I see the Beltline as a billboard. That's all it is. It's not wayfinding people. I mean, every business in Monona says take this exit, take that exit. That's no more than a billboard. I don't see that wayfinding. I agree the one on Broadway, to know the right turn and everything, but the Beltline I think is clearly just advertising the brand. And I know I get it. You want to do it, but every business in Monona would love to do that, and our sign code doesn't allow it. It just doesn't. That's not wayfinding. That's advertising. It's a billboard on the Beltline.
Well, the code doesn't allow it, but an exception was made.
For WPS, on WPS's property, for WPS's campus, for a 20-acre campus, not for an end cap I don't mean that disparagingly, but this is a totally different situation, completely different than what we approved.
well, I view it a little differently if it's a temporary one versus.
So temporary billboards would be okay? So temporary billboards would be allowable then under our sign? Because that's what it is. Let's call it what it is.
Well,
But it's existing, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different. It's an existing sign. The exception was made, and I guess I kind of look at it as in a way to assist the WPS with their transition to Starion. that I'm willing to extend approval on those two signs through the life of their lease, at which time WPS or whoever owns them is responsible for removing them, because we don't want, there's no future association with that tenant space.
Mr. Kugel?
The sign right now, this is WPS Bank. Has that been there 6 years? Has been there 6 years?
Yeah, the bank, yeah.
So, but I mean, at the time, you're saying, Mr. Humberg, that it was to show that it was part of the WPS campus.
Mhm.
But it just says WPS Bank. I mean, so it was always put up there to just point where the bank was, right? I guess it should have came down 3 years ago when I read.
No, that one wasn't a temporary one. That was not temporary approval. The one on Broadway is a temporary approval.
Oh, the one on Broadway is a temporary.
Yeah.
This is the one.
This is the monument sign on the Beltline.
This is the one you don't like. Or
No, the one on the Beltline's the one that doesn't match anything in our sign code.
Then I'm still asking the question. This has been there for 6 years.
Correct.
But is this the one that was supposed to be down after 3 years?
No.
The other one was. So this was to be an okay permanent sign for the bank? This one?
For the WPS campus and their bank, yes. We did it for the campus.
Oh, I wasn't here at the time, so I just look at it, I see a WPS Bank. I don't see WPS Health Insurance on it. So I was a little confused.
I see what you're saying, though. It is advertising the brand of WPS Bank. I mean, it is a billboard for the bank that was approved. I know there was other things attached to it with the ownership of the property and the campus itself, but it was branding one specific thing. I would be inclined to be okay with a temporary approval
How long?
through the lease.
Which ends in 18?
January 18th.
Sharon, any comments?
Yeah, I've got to agree with Chris on this one. Having been involved in the original discussion, I see here in the notes, even then I was concerned about precedent for off-premises signs and so forth. And Griff, I know you said that we encouraged them at the time, and I don't recall that. They strongly wanted that.
We encourage
We
Broadway.
encourage the
Yeah.
Broadway. I didn't mean
Okay.
to say that. We
Yeah,
encouraged
okay.
the-
So, yeah, I agree with Chris's statements.
So what's to be done with the signs if Starion's not able to use them at this time?
WPS could reface it as a WPS sign. Just take the bank off.
And remove the one on Broadway?
No, those are two different signs.
Well, they're not. The other one's an off-premise sign. I mean, it doesn't fit within the code either. I mean, that's not even on WPS's campus.
WPS forewent a sign on Broadway to be able to put it at that location. That was a negotiation. They said in lieu of putting one in front of our campus, which they are eligible for, they would rather put it on that corner for directional signage for their bank. And we, at that point, agreed to that.
So what I'm asking is what's supposed to happen with them now that WPS Bank is gone?
Well, that's why we're here tonight discussing it. I would agree to let that go temporary, but we need to have something from WPS that they understand that they agreed not to have another sign up there to have this sign. Now, if they paid for that sign, I suspect that is something WPS would agree to. We'd need to know if that was a condition of approval of the sign.
Alder Holmquist, any comments?
I think the sign that's on the Beltline, I would not be in support of, but the sign on Broadway I would, given the information stated.
Do we have a motion?
Can I ask a question of the applicant? Can I ask a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Have you talked to WPS about the sign on Broadway? And they're aware of the fact that you paid some money to take that sign over? And I assume you weren't thinking about the condition from 6 years ago, so you didn't talk about the fact that they gave up the right for another sign along that frontage.
Yeah, that conversation, unfortunately, probably the person that was most in the loop would be Mark Jensen, who's no longer with WPS, so obviously I wasn't able to kind of go back into the full background behind the decisions and agreements made at that time. WPS is currently negotiating with Starion Financial for a ground lease for the large, like the monument sign toward the Beltline, since it does reside on their property. WPS is willing to consider that lease with Starion, and they're just negotiating kind of the details of that, pending, obviously, approval by the Plan Commission. But the Broadway sign we've had, I'm not aware of any specific discussions.
Okay, thanks.
To me, I remember McDonald's, and when they came in and we asked them to take down their pylon sign, and we gave them a period of transition on that pylon sign, which also doesn't meet our code. But that eventually they knew that would have to come down. So I think there may have been a bit of a precedence for allowing something that's in existence, but not code compliant.
Are you referring now to the one on Broadway or the one on the Beltline? When you're comparing them?
I'm comparing the
One on the drive.
billboard that you're referring to.
No, I know the.
I'm comparing it to the pylon sign on Monona Drive.
Do you think that's the same as an off-premise sign?
No, but I think that it was a non-compliant sign that we gave them time to get their ducks in a row, and they knew that it was going to be coming down. I'm wondering if a compromise in this situation to put a sunset on this and say that in 2018 it comes down as somebody has proposed wouldn't be a way of. I think I guess what I'm getting at is there was a precedence in working with an applicant in the past. I'm wondering if that is something that we would consider tonight. Sir?
For me, I'd certainly consider it on the Broadway sign. I just don't see the Beltline sign as appropriate in any way.
We have different opinions. Do we have a motion?
I'll start one. Move approval with conditions as recommended by staff. I better be clear on that. Move approval of the Broadway sign and denial of the Beltline sign with condition as recommended by staff, and additional condition that we get, what should I say, confirmation from WPS that they have decided to not have any other monument sign along Broadway for the life of this sign, and then condition 4 that it would be twilighted on whatever that date is in 2018. It's 2018, right?
It's January 2018.
Okay, January 2018, whatever the date is on here.
I'll second that.
Further discussion?
For clarification, so this sign would have to come down immediately?
No, we wouldn't be approving a permit to change it to a Starion sign. The application here is to change that to a Starion sign. WPS would certainly have the ability, and it would probably be a staff approval to reface it to WPS.
So you're going to have 2 WPS signs?
They have 3. There's one at the very end, one about in the middle, and then this one, but they're all 500 feet apart. And that's what our code calls for. And they're all on their property. And they have 3 separate major lots that face the Beltline, and that's how we were able to do it.
Further discussion? Griff?
I'm just trying to clarify in my own mind in terms of what we would be approving or not approving. Clearly, the existing Beltline sign, or probably the existing Beltline sign is no longer accurate. It's going to have to be changed in some form or fashion.
Correct.
And so and maybe the answer is to deny it and let WPS come in and suggest what it is that they plan to do with it.
Right. And like I mentioned, I don't believe if they just change it to WPS, Sonia, would that not just be a staff approval?
Right, I can approve it at the staff meeting.
I don't know if they even come here, they just would ask staff to allow them to reface it to WPS. It's their sign on their property.
I don't have any problem in approving the other one for 3 years. Well, if the approval, this is my thought of it. If the approval of the Broadway sign is going to go for 3 years for the period of this lease, I don't think we need additional commitments by WPS. Personally, I think that one of the considerations of getting that commitment was that we were giving WPS a third Beltline exposure sign, rather than having to have a landscape sign on Broadway.
Okay, I know what you're saying.
And
So you'd like to strike condition 3.
Which one was
3
that?
was that the WPS had to.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's cleaner to deal with this applicant separately than dealing with WPS. And that my preference would be to just approve the Broadway sign for the period of the lease and let them come in and see what the situation is after the end of the lease.
Okay.
And then to just, to not approve the Broadway sign and let WPS come in, or not approve the Beltline sign, let WPS come in and we'll deal with WPS on that.
That's a good idea.
Okay, I agree to that.
I like that too.
I propose that as an amendment.
Is the maker,
Yes.
seconder okay with that? Do
Definitely.
we have to vote on that?
No.
Friendly amendment, it's okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good idea.
We can vote on the whole thing as amended. I don't care, take a vote.
No, you're right. It's a friendly amendment if the maker and the second agree. Dennis?
So did Starion pay $42,000 for this sign?
It was part of the investment in the bank purchase. That's the original investment by the bank.
Well, that's something that'll have to be worked out between the parties.
Is there further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please. Mr. Hum, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Hamburg,
Aye.
Mr. Stein,
Nay.
Mr. Kugel, Mr. Ganzer,
Nay.
Mr. Holmquist,
Aye.
Mr. Dorschel,
Aye.
Ms. Depnish,
Aye.
and it's 4 aye and 3 no, so you do not have to vote correct.
Get to vote. All righty. Gentlemen, thank you for this evening.
That makes sense.
All right, we're going to go to 6B, which is consideration of action on landscape ground sign permit for 6033 Monona Drive, represented by Diana McMaster, Badger State Designs. Good evening, welcome.
I'm not good at this. I've only done it twice in my life, and the last time was here.
All right.
So I guess where do we start? It's a simple ground sign, non-lit, composite materials. due to the size constraints, the panels have to be pretty small, but there's not a lot we can do about that.
Okay. Thank you. You want to just be available for some questions or comments? Sonia?
It's a new landscape ground sign. The property has one that you've probably seen falling over in the middle of the property, not in the same location. Staff's recommendation is approval.
Commissioners? Comments, questions? Mr. Kugel?
There's spots for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 tenants on there.
That's what he wants to eventually, yeah. I think what he's doing there is renting out office space, so it could be just 10 offices or 9 offices.
Okay, so it's set up potentially could
for
have
10, yeah.
10 little businesses in there.
Yeah, I think he has 7 or 8 now.
Oh, okay.
So he has not provided that list as yet.
Oh, so
which
the
is-
number, the names you put on here are just
It
just randomly to fill up the sign
Yeah.
for purposes.
Yeah, he just gave us the 3 for now, so.
Question, the landscape date you have on there, Sonia, is June 1st. That's barely over 2 weeks away. That might be a little aggressive to try to get the sign manufactured, installed, and landscaped. It seems like we could
Yeah, we're about 3 weeks out to
put
get
the
it
sign, and
installed.
then the landscaping might be a few weeks after that. This seems aggressive. I like
It's fine
aggressive,
with
don't
me.
get me wrong,
We can
but,
change it.
but yeah. Do you know when the sign will be installed?
Well, pending approval, we'll start ordering materials and hopefully we're shooting for the first week of June.
So, middle of July or something for landscaping? Be reasonable to get somebody in there?
Yeah. Further comments, questions? None? Is there a motion?
Move approval with conditions as recommended by staff to change June 1st to July 15th for landscaping.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That it?
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Okay, we're going to move back to 5A, review approval of, hopefully, of housing element of comprehensive plan, tabled 4/13/15. So I think we first need to have somebody remove this from the table.
Move to remove.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Sonia?
So this was last reviewed in March, and there were lots of comments on it. In general, there was confusion about the different data sources and where the various numbers were coming from. There were different totals for housing units and things like that. So I think a lot of that's been cleared up. The 2 main sources are the 2010 census and the 2013 American Community Survey, which is a rolling 5-year average. The survey is taken more as a random sample and then combined with a 5-year period for an average. So you get more current data with the 2013 American Community Survey, but it's not as accurate as the 2010 census. So I think in this draft of the element, all of the totals of the housing unit numbers come from the 2010 census, whereas we get a little bit more updated percentage figures when using the 2013 ACS. So clarifying the data in general. Definitions were also added at the beginning. Hopefully that helps as a reader goes through it. Specific data on owner-occupied housing versus renter-occupied housing was requested. And that was added, as well as comparing it to some communities that might be more comparable to Monona. Cottage Grove and McFarland were added. And those were some of the major changes, so we can discuss and go through it.
Thank you. Comments? Brian? I see some ink on your page there.
I should have had the track changes on the previous one, so I don't undo what I may have already suggested, so. bear with me, and if I am undoing stuff, I get it. Maybe it's just the second read, but on the first page, the 4 items are listed of the major trends. I wonder if we want those trends to be listed in a way that is flipped, rather than starting with, for example, limited developable land, switch it to starting with Monona's desirable location, quality of life contribute to continued capacity to develop and redevelop housing. However, limited, and go on to the negative piece, that rather than putting the negative foot forward, start with the positive aspect of it. So the suggestion would be to do that with the first bullet. The second bullet would start with the demand for home modifications, including et cetera, and then it would end with single-family home size and age are indicators for.
Read it. Read what you would like it to say.
Demands for home modification, including additions, remodeling, rebuilding, are indicated due to the single-family home size and age.
Okay, keep going.
The third bullet is the demand for rehabilitated or new multifamily units is indicated due to the age of multifamily housing stock. And the last one, there was no suggestion on that one. I'm not sure if I'm undoing a previous edit.
You just want to start with the positive.
Yeah.
I think particularly in the first one, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree on the first one, definitely.
Yeah, the other two might not fit as neatly.
The other two seem a little, your edits seem a little confusing for me, but I'm easily confused. You've got a lot of...
The paragraph after the bullets, I wonder if it's even needed to tell people what the intent is there. The last definition on the first page, the 1 unit detached, is it really on all 4 walls, or is it on all exterior walls? Because it may have more than 4.
I think exterior would be more accurate.
Where are you? What paragraph?
The very second last word on the sheet.
1 unit detached definition.
So change 4 to exterior. On
Before we move, anybody else on page 2.1? Can we talk about, before we get into this, let's just talk bullet point 1. Everybody seems to like that lead. Seem no objections. Bullet point 2, comfortable with that, or like to see it as is?
2 and 3 as is, I think, makes more sense.
Yeah, I
agree.
Okay, let's keep 2 and 3. What about the paragraph that follows?
I don't mind it. I kind of like it, talking about what we're going to be doing.
I thought that the paragraph related more to the definitions that we're following rather than to the above. And it was an introduction into those definitions more.
Could be moved up to the end of the first paragraph. I'm not married to it, but it's just a simple way to spell out to the reader what they should expect in the chapter. So, whichever way.
I think it's good.
I think before the bullet points makes sense.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that? So far, we're cruising. And then everybody's okay with exterior walls rather than 4?
Yep.
No further comments? We're going to move on to 2.2.
Underneath 2.1.1, the first 2 sentences I have deleted, and in general deleted, and starting with Monona's population has stabilized. Going through the whole paragraph, and then the second to last sentence, the average household size in Monona is declining, but that's the average household size, in parentheses, the number of occupants in Monona is declining. And then,
Well, that's the definition on the page before. Household consists of all people who occupy a housing unit.
Yeah.
I think I get to it later of why. I'll strike that for now, and I'll see if it strikes when I come back. So if you get to the end of the paragraph, then add in the piece for further information about the demographic characteristics, see the other section. So rather than leading the paragraph with, if you want to hear about this other stuff, go here, put the information that we're talking about in this section, and then relate it to the other area.
I get it.
The number of occupants, hold off on that potential edit, and I'll see if it comes back and why I wrote it.
Okay, so,
You know what might have caused that? Sorry, Jim. Is the sentence before it says Monona has a high amount of households. Maybe that should be a high amount of housing units
Yeah,
occupied.
it should either be households comprised of individuals or housing units occupied by individuals.
Right.
Maybe that's what it was.
Because I think we mixed the two things, and that's what did it.
Okay.
so what's the recommendation? Monona has a high amount of,
Housing units, because our definition says housing units, a house, an apartment, or a mobile home, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be the definition of what we're talking about, correct?
housing units occupied by,
Individuals living
and
alone.
then we'd be able to keep the average household size.
Because the household definition, I think that's what gets you reading it, is you're going through two things.
Further edits here, Walter?
That was it on this page.
Anybody else? Anything on 2.2? We're comfortable with the comments? Going once, going twice, 2.3.
I was curious by the use of the word tenure underneath 213, second sentence. And I believe it's being related to tenure of owner occupiers, but tenure is really a length of time, which I don't see how it's connected, so I'm wondering if a different term would be better.
You're
or
correct.
that-
Tenure would be the length of time they were living in the housing unit, and I don't remember if I had more data on that in the previous draft, but right now it doesn't look like it makes much sense. So I can look at that and remove it.
Yeah, it might have made sense before we deleted something else.
So what would, what's the recommendation for an edit here?
The library will close in 15 minutes. Please make your selections and bring your items to the self-check machine for
In the context of the sentence, it actually doesn't really make much sense at all.
Yeah.
Eliminate the whole sentence.
It should just be a different word other than tenure or eliminate the whole sentence, but I can look at it and rework it.
And then
So that's a question.
I see the 7.6 rate for the vacancy rate for 2010. And then if I go through that paragraph, it really references part of 2.4, table 2.4, but nowhere in any of the narrative do we reference the reader to 2.4. So the rate for the 2010 rate is 7.6, which the reason it draws your attention is because it's the highest on the whole table 2.3. And if you go into the next page to look at table 2.4 and all the narrative that goes along with it, we're sure spending a lot of real estate here to point out why that number isn't right or positive. And one consideration is if we try to point too much to something like that, we might be drawing attention to trying to undo that number. This is the first section and only section we talk about 2013 data. Which I understand why. It's because our vacancy rate shot up, and if the 2010 data likely is not representing what the current trend is, which would be decreasing. And then the last little paragraph after the table 2.4, if all of that information does stay, the last two pieces should be switched in chronological order, and we shouldn't start with 14 and then go to 13 when everything else reads in the reverse order in the document. And for a nice run-on sentence of my own, this is the only place that we've added in another piece, which is the MG&E data. So when I kind of step back from all that, in this little section, we're spending a lot of time trying to show why the 7.6 number is not our current reality.
We're painting a more current and optimistic picture.
You're saying you want to reference this table 2.4 somewhere?
Yeah, so either there's a way to clean it up and highlight why we are adding in 2 additional pieces of information only into this section and painting it in a way that since 2010 there have been some significant changes, and we want to point that out because we don't believe the 2010 data is reflective, or we have to consider why we're adding all this extra information.
So what is your proposed edit?
I don't know if I have one, unfortunately.
Well, the 7.6 is included in table 2.3 because I was just thinking one way to clear it up is to not talk about vacancy in table 2.3. However, it's included there because it's part of your total units, which is explained in the rest of the table.
I think that's important.
Okay, so we could leave it there. But then in the narrative, we don't talk about vacancy at all until we get to that little 3-line paragraph after table 2.4.
Right.
So we're really only spending a little bit of time talking about vacancy. And the point would be to show that it was high in 2010 but might be coming down. And I could, the only way that you can show that is with using the 2013 ACS, and then the most recent data is MG&E. I could take off the last few words and closer to 2% in 2013. That's a little bit more than's probably needed. And maybe switch the narrative and the table around so that it...
Move the paragraph below 2.4, table 2.4 above it. And then in the first paragraph, you reference figure 2.1.
Switch that around.
Yeah, don't talk about 2.1 until we get down there. Is the intent that the narrative describes the table and the table is to follow?
So it's taking the section of in figure 2.1 and taking that as a paragraph and swapping it with the in 2013 the vacancy rate and swapping those 2 pieces.
But I think to reference 2.4 would be important or helpful.
Yep. That would make sense to me.
Everybody okay with that? Next.
All right. I'm trying to figure out where best to start to make sense here.
Just jump right into the thing you say makes any sense.
Yeah. Although I think it's correct with typing out the words 15.6%. It seems strange compared to the rest of the the narrative. So I'm not sure if there's a way to start with another word so we can avoid that.
Just turn it into a number.
Yeah, but I think it's written that way because if you're starting a sentence with a number, it's supposed to be written out like that. So I think
Let it go.
either we let it go or come up with a way to put a word in front of it to make it so it matches.
Put duh in front of it.
Yeah. Yeah. About 3/4 of the way down, there's a sentence that starts with, "These statistics reflect a continued," and I suggest that we strike continued and just indicate, "These statistics reflect a demand in Monona for senior housing and potentially smaller housing units," and I question where we're drawing that connection from.
Okay. The potentially smaller housing units comes from the fact that Monona has the lowest household size in the county at 1.99, and also we have the highest percentage of individuals that live alone in housing units
That made sense
in
to
the
me,
county.
based on the couple sentences before that.
Okay.
Explains it.
Brian, what if the 15-point thing, what if it started out, individuals living alone that are age 65 or older represented 15.6% or 590 households?
Yeah. Something to that flip would be great. The piece about the potentially smaller housing unit, the question I wrote next to it was, household size may not really reflect the desire for unit size, because nowadays there are fewer people that occupy more space. And so just because our rate is down at 199, and I'm okay not addressing that issue, that was the thing that jumped out at me of, we're making the leap just because the number of people per house is decreasing, or housing unit doesn't necessarily equally relate that people are going to want smaller units.
Anything else on 2.4?
Jim?
Chris?
I don't have a change, but if you remember last time we had this, I had some issues with us calling for more and more apartments, and this illustrates it to me right here, because I think we're more, our community size and what we are is more like DeForest, McFarland, and Cottage Grove. We're not Madison or I mean, Dane County. To say we're close to Dane County, well, Dane County's, I mean, really controlled. I mean, it's stage is set by Madison, which is the vast majority of Dane County. When we're just over 50%, and I say just over because we just added a couple hundred units aren't reflected here, and we likely will be adding some units down at the Triangle. We're approaching 50% owner-occupied and 50% rental. And we should be comparing ourselves with Cottage Grove, McFarland, DeForest communities our size. So that's where I talked about this quite a bit, and somewhere in this document, I would like to see us get away from calling, when we call for more density, I love what Ganser did down there on Femray. That's a great way to get more density with owner-occupied density. If we're looking at some more owner-occupied in any respect, condos or whatever, absolutely, but I'm very hesitant to sit and have a document here to give out to developers to say, we are looking for more apartments in Monona, because I think we are up to here in rental units in Monona right now. And I can see it happening where we have some mixed use, where you have a primary function of commercial with some auxiliary residential above, if that'll sell, but I don't see us going out there and telling people we want them to invest heavily in apartments in Monona, especially with what we'll likely be bringing in the triangle. I think we're getting really over-skewed with not very many owner-occupied units for the size of our community. We don't have the support system to take care of that.
So just making sure that the language isn't, by comparing ourselves to Monona, or to Madison or Dane County, we don't want to project or.
Well, yeah, and I'm not even that, I don't really care about that here. I just care about further in our document, and then when we reference the comprehensive plan, I'd like to relook at those sections that say we want to encourage more multifamily, to be a little more specific on what type of multifamily we're looking for. I think this data should be used, that we are very, compared to other communities our size, we're very low in owner occupied. And I think it's a mistake to tip that too far.
Is there data, I know vacant means vacant and ready to occupy.
Yes.
It does not represent foreclosed homes that the bank just is warehousing, correct?
It counts them if they're vacant.
During the census.
But if it counts them as vacant, or it counts them as?
Whatever it was during the census and whoever responded for that household. So it would just depend.
But if there's the bank is in the process of foreclosing, it's not counted as vacant.
Not if somebody's living in it.
It doesn't matter for tonight's discussion. Anything else on 2.4? Griff, did you have something, Sharon?
Will that chart change colors when it
That's
gets
what I was
printed?
just
It's
gonna
hard to
say.
read.
It looks
for-
really nice on the
yeah.
computer, but I'll change the
Yeah.
colors. It doesn't print well.
I was just gonna say, I don't have too much trouble with I think the potentially smaller housing units really is a major modification of that, and I don't think we need to pursue it particularly much more.
Thank you. Move to 2.5.
The table 2.5, underneath family households, the percentages. I understand that these percentages are relating to the total households. I'm wondering if when we are doing subheaders that we really want the percentages to be of the total and not of what the sub is. So really, should the two-parent percentage be the percentage of family households and single parent of the family households? Same with down underneath the non-family.
I think that makes more sense. This is how the data is presented in the census, so it's really the easiest way of doing it. I could eliminate the percentage for two-parent versus single-parent, or we could just do family versus non-family, unless you think is it easy enough to divide out the subheader percentages?
What would you prefer?
I would eliminate probably of the percentage for the subcategory down to the two-parent and single-parent, but leave the major ones.
So you're going to leave total household, family household, non-family household, but take the percentages away from the subheadings.
That would be my suggestion.
How's everybody else feel?
It would clarify things a little bit if you just move the percentages for there's a slight indentation from the 100% total household to family households. But there's no indentation between the family households, the two-parent and single-parent. And if you just move those over a little bit so that it would, as your eye would go down, you would see, the 54 and the non-family household 45 would be in the same vertical alignment, but then the subcategories would be moved over just slightly. I think it would, make it a lot easier to see where these percentages are coming from. And that would clear up the problem.
Thumbs up. Any other comments? You're okay with that, Brian?
Yep, that makes sense. Underneath non-family households, I'm wondering if we're missing a category here. Because what we have, and maybe I misread it in the definition, but the only two subcategories we have here is really one subcategory. It's folks that live alone, and then a smaller group of anybody 65 and older that live alone. What other categories are represented for non-family households? That two or more adults that are non-related?
I could add a definition of family to the beginning. I think if it's two or more adults that are unrelated, if they live together and cook together, it counts as a family. They're operating as a family unit by cooking together and living together in the same unit.
So I'm just wondering of what we're teasing out here in the sense of non-family household.
What is a non-family household then? There's 1,700 of them.
What's the definition of family?
Does the family household mean there's children there?
That's what I'm thinking that this, well, I think that's
How
what
do we
the
have
sentence
1,700
means.
of something? That's a lot of households. That's more than some.
Well, the fact that family households are defined as two parents and single parents suggests that
Yeah, it
somehow
does,
that
doesn't
is
it?
related to the
To
family.
children.
Children, yeah.
Yeah. One would think.
So if that's the case, and it seems like we would want some other item underneath non-family households to represent potentially adults without kids.
Yeah.
I don't think that's presented in the census data. This is exactly
change
what was
that.
presented.
Well, could you infer that if you have a non-family household, no kids, if it's a householder living at home alone, the rest of them would be couples? I suppose we can't do that. We don't know that for a fact, but that would seem to be that missing number you're looking for.
Yeah.
But that seems low. I mean, there's got to be more than 300 couples in Monona without kids in the house. I'm not sure.
And so I know we might not be able to solve it now, but that was some of the stuff that jumped out.
Well, could we solve it by listing the definition of family?
You're still going to have a missing piece of information underneath non-family households, because if
Unless couples with no kids are defined as a family, right?
let's say they aren't, then you have couples that live together are non-family, and two adults that are not married or legally partners living together as non-family.
I feel like we're trying to
Is it just
compile our own data when we're referencing the U.S. Census and what their definitions are. So it might not be, we might be missing a category in our minds, but based on the U.S. Census information, we can't make up categories if that's what we're referencing, right?
Does non-family households mean no
think it
children households?
I don't know what the definition.
What is the purpose of the information that we're using it for? If someone's looking at this and they're looking at housing trends for family households versus non-family is more significant than just two-parent, single-parent, or if you're living alone.
Couples are not included in here, period.
Or couples without kids that
Well,
haven't
that's what I'm
had
saying.
kids yet.
That's what I'm saying, couples are not included.
In which one?
Unless it's non-family.
Well, only because under family, two-parent and single-parent suggests or implies children.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't think we have over half of our households with kids in them in Monona. I just don't think we do. I don't think we have 2,000 households that have children in them.
Okay.
Doesn't make sense. Good.
What does it say?
Well,
All right, go
I
ahead.
don't know, I'm just asking where are the couples?
Okay, so a family is a group of 2 people or more, one of whom is the householder, related by birth, marriage, or adoption, and residing together.
Okay.
All such people, including related subfamily members, are considered as members of one family.
Okay.
So what are non-family households?
They don't have a definition.
Anything else?
Yeah.
There's a lot of it,
The
though.
non-family, the family households add up, 1633 and 420 add to 2053. But the non-family doesn't. Households living alone, 13 plus 5, 19.
Well-
It's 1912.
Yeah, they're not meant to.
That's a subcategory
Yes.
of, so.
Yes.
But it's a subcategory, but it's more. It's
But
not-
65 is a subcategory of
Of living
non-family
alone.
households
So that 519 is part of the 1393.
and part of the 1715. It doesn't have to be part of 1393. Couldn't you have 265 and
Oh,
older?
I
living?
see what
It's
you're saying.
indented,
I see
but-
what you're saying. yeah.
Or would that then be a family household?
Sorry to open this up. And the only reason I opened it up is because I think it does lead to this piece that we're looking at, more families that are represented by folks with children moving into older homes that once were filled with individuals more recently that were 65 and older.
Well, that clears it up for me. Sorry, I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
I'll put it more simply. There are more and more people that are walking down the street with little kids that I wonder, who are they?
Which as you grab your comprehensive plan to try to figure out who they are.
And I try to ask them where they represent, so.
Well, what's the homework for this section?
Delete that table.
Rob's right, we're trying to reconstruct the table we got from the U.S. Census Bureau. We're gonna publish it the way they did it. If you think we need a definition, give a definition.
I'm comfortable with that. Just leave it and just do the definition.
We're just drawing a lot of conclusions based on this.
Right.
We're talking that there's going to be continued demand for senior housing and potentially smaller units, and the demand will proportion. I mean, we make a lot of claims based on this data, so I want to make sure that we are comfortable with this information.
Where are those claims?
On the previous page at the end. So I'm fine with the shift over to make the numbers make more sense. And if there's missing data, there's missing data. There's nothing we can do about it.
Add the definition. Okay with that?
I think it might help the reader.
Okay.
Maybe just in parentheses underneath the source, at the end of the source.
I could do it like I have for the rest of the sections and put family at the beginning of the element.
Oh, and
Definition.
are you citing where the definitions are coming from?
I will add that they came from the census.
I just remember when we were dealing with a different ordinance, we were tied up on defining family or not. And so if we added, I would want to say we're using someone else's language if we could. In 214, the second to last sentence, in good repair, or is it in good condition? I'm fine with either one. And the last sentence about using the age data together with assessment value and other information can provide good indication. I understand why this is there, and I'm wondering if there's a way to cite that this is a standard. Or are we making this up? This idea that
I've taken it from the Department of Administration's Guide on Housing Elements and from reviewing other housing elements, but I don't know how you specifically reference, I mean, if you need to cite through all of here, what is best practice to arrive at a certain.
And maybe not, maybe that was just a question to
Right.
make sure that we weren't just making up that this is a standard in the,
Industry standard type of,
and if it is, I am completely fine. It makes perfect sense, but. The last sentence before figure 2.2, housing amenities, particularly garages and bathrooms, may not be meeting the needs of new homeowners, period. And delete the rest of the sentence.
we used homeowners before, or what's it, we used housing units?
Households.
Householder. Because that could apply to rental or homeowner. Yes?
Okay. But you just don't want families with children.
I just think there are other people that we're trying to deal with. It's not just families with children.
Sorry, didn't
See
mean to-
how that table got me?
Didn't mean to paint you
Sorry,
into a corner.
sorry.
I think I ran out of ink though after this, so don't worry.
That's a shame.
Sorry. I try to be thorough and read. Sorry.
2.5.
He's assuming
Any
people
more?
are actually going to read this.
I am.
2.5. Let's go to 2.6.
I have nothing.
2.7.
Fred has nothing. Nobody does. Jim doesn't even ask the rest of us.
The table of 2.8 cost burden households, does it make sense to compare this to other communities or not? And the question would be particularly Cottage Grove, DeForest, and McFarland.
You know, why are we are more urban than they are. Why are we comparing ourselves to them? We're a small town, but we're,
I think Monona is really difficult to find a comparable city because they're comparable in size, but they really have different factors, and it's either you're landlocked, or you're small, or you're old, or you're young.
Mhm.
Agree.
So it's up to you if you think adding comparables would be beneficial here. Also, I think the housing element should be somewhat general. You're providing an inventory and some data to help guide your more generalized goals and objectives, but you can really drill down into the data with something like the strategic housing plan. So it's just a matter of how far you want to go with that. We could get a ton of data on housing affordability instead of a half a page, but it's just what's the benefit of going more?
I think that's an astute point.
okay.
Underneath 2.2, the first sentence after the comma, aid developers' ability, and then it finishes by land and by regulations and strike land development.
And by land regulations.
That would be fine.
Is that what I'm asking?
I had it just by regulations, but by land regulations is fine. I'm not sure if it needs the.
No, by developable land and by, tell me,
Regulations.
regulations. Okay?
And then the amount of undeveloped land in Monona is extremely limited. And strike the available. 2.2.1 with little raw, I wonder if we want to change it to with little undeveloped land. Improvements to the single-family housing stock will come from redevelopment or rehabilitation. We got to add in a word.
Undeveloped land, comma, improvements to the single-family housing stock will come from, is that what you said?
Yep.
Will come.
If I read it correctly. That was it there.
Other further comments?
Yeah.
Mr. Ganser doesn't get upset. Move on to 2.8.
222?
Chris, sorry, sir.
We're starting to talk about the multifamily again, and I just want us to focus on what we agree we should be doing, because I think on the multifamily, just like we do on the single family, our emphasis should be encouraging redevelopment and rehabilitation of the existing multifamily housing stock. That's where we should be putting our efforts. Build that back up.
Say that again, Chris.
Just like we said with the single family, improvements to the single family housing stock come from redevelopment or rehab. We should have something very similar for the multifamily.
Yeah,
We should really be emphasizing redeveloping all the multifamily we have. We have a lot. People don't realize how much we have. And we keep talking about what's going down, so let's just build some new stuff over here. Well, that doesn't help this other
Absolutely.
stuff.
That's what's so frustrating about the whole urban thing is redevelopment is so terribly expensive. You know,
Yes.
it's so hard to make the numbers work, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the amount of apartments in this community that have seen better days is incredible.
And as a municipality, we should be encouraging that redevelopment. And if we're, some places where we're putting money into new multifamily use, we should be putting it into redevelopment of those units, because that's what needs help, like you just said, more so than a new apartment building stands on its own. Redeveloping areas, that needs help. So I just, when I read this, I look at this and I say, oh, yep, they want me to build more apartments in Monona. And you know what I think we really want is to redevelop and rehabilitate our existing multifamily. I think if we're going to have an emphasis, that's what it should be. I spoke briefly on this on whatever it was, 3, 4, 5 meetings ago. I haven't had more comments on anything as long as I've been on Plan Commission than people coming up to me, you're absolutely right, we don't need more new apartments. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that people watch this.
Regarding Broadway Square.
Well, not just that. No, absolutely, I've had comments that, but I've had a lot of comments in general, and I'm, number one, shocked that many people watch this, but number two, that they all made a point of coming up and talking about it. It hit a nerve, but the average person that perhaps doesn't watch this doesn't realize how much rental property we have in this city.
Chris, what if the second to last sentence read, existing multifamily stock demand for rehabilitated multifamily units is projected to continue?
Absolutely.
Right, so to just delete the word new, I'm not.
Or.
New or, yeah. I mean, I can do that, but I don't know if we want to just read through this specific paragraph since it's so important to the rest of how everything relates together and make sure if there's a sentence that you don't agree with. Because I see one point of conflict, I'm not disagreeing, but just the fact that where it starts, moreover, the city's component plans to this comprehensive plan call for gradually increased density.
I wanted to talk about
Right.
that. I want to revisit that section and look at that, because we're giving the inference in our land use plan, for example, that we'd like people to come in and build more new apartment buildings. I think our inference should be we'd love them to come in and redevelop and rehab what we have. So I have a note there about that, and I think that's part of getting these, going through them one section at a time, and then coordinating them all once we've sat down and really dissected it. But so I agree with you, but it takes looking at all of them. I think we just want to have an inference. I'm not saying we will forbid a new apartment building. We want to have our emphasis on rehab and, you know, fixing up what we have. And I think somewhere I'd like at the end to have a goal that we try to maintain a healthy balance of owner-occupied versus renter-occupied housing stock in Monona. I think we're getting a critical point in that.
And I think with that, if that policy statement is made, then we also understand that there's not a general goal of increasing our housing units. It's kind of a question, but that's how I understand it too, because if we can't increase single family, so we have to maintain the proportion that we have, which means maintain
Not necessarily.
the amount of
Dale's development down on Femright's a small example, but that increased density. Condo units increased density. Auxiliary use above commercial will increase density, but that's different than having another 200 or 300 unit apartment building or complex going in.
Okay, and I think that's also an important point because that eliminates some of the conflict with the last section of this paragraph. Because if we allow auxiliary uses above retail, then that doesn't necessarily conflict with our other goals that encourage mixed-use activity centers where we include housing and shopping together along a major transit corridor.
I would agree. I'm not trying to sit here and say we should never have apartments above commercial. If it will bear out and the market agrees that. I know there's been some difficulty renting those upper units, and I'm not sure where that's at or who can do it, but you're talking about adding 5 or 10 units here, maybe a dozen there. It's a lot different than putting in another major apartment complex, in my mind, and how it affects that ratio. We're, what are we, 4,000 some total dwelling units, or whatever we're calling households, and we've added 200, we'll add a few hundred more. I mean, that swings the balance another 10% from what we're even looking at. Those are some big swings, and we're looking at some tough numbers, I think, for Monona.
So if Fairway Glen, for example, came in and they took out their first floor of residential, and that would clearly be a mixed-use building with commercial on the first floor, but you would have 17 units per floor.
I don't think that's clearly, but yeah. I mean, it's a hard call, and we have to look at the proposal. What I'm trying to get at is I prefer that our comprehensive plan doesn't, when I pick up a developer, doesn't beckon, oh yeah, come on and build some more apartments in Monona because we'd love to see them. Come on and rehab and rehabilitate our existing multifamily use because our existing multifamily buildings because we would love to see that. Is what I'm trying to shout.
That's what you're trying to encourage.
With this plan, yes.
And I understand that point, but I just want to make sure that it's not conflicting with our other sections, and like you're saying, we have to look at them all together.
I'd like to revisit them once I've seen this data. This data gave me a little jolt when I saw some of it, whenever that was you gave it to us before. A month ago, 2 months ago, when was it?
Sonia, why don't you take us to the area that you have a concern of?
On page 2-7 at the bottom, the last sentence, moreover, the city's component plans, which are under the umbrella of the comprehensive plan, call for gradually increased density of mixed-use residential development in appropriate areas. Further, the land use element directs the city to, and this was a policy or a goal in there, to encourage development and redevelopment of compact, highly planned mixed-use activity centers that include shopping, employment, housing, and recreation opportunities. And then the component plans that are referenced are by footnote down at the bottom. Policies and Monona Drive urban design guidelines for how higher density can shape urban form, and the strategic housing plan and the Broadway corridor plan.
So if we do the edit of, it says we're focusing on rehabilitating multifamily units and mixed-use residential opportunities. I don't see that as inconsistent.
No, and rather saying plan calls for gradually increased density, maybe we could say plan call for some increased density of mixed-use residential development areas. We can't rewrite the 2007 strategic housing plan, the Broadway corridor plan, and the Monona Drive urban design guidelines, but the two of those three we wrote here, and they didn't really say we wanted to really crank up density. They said we'd allow density above commercial. That's different than saying it called for increasing it. It was an allowable component. No, strategic housing plan may have done that. We didn't write that.
Griff, did you have a comment?
No, I would agree with the last comment, that change gradually to some increased density and less.
It softens it.
Hardly, it seems, part of the thing that I'm wrestling with here is multifamily housing really here is including both apartments and condominiums.
Right.
So we might be encouraging condominiums, but we might not be encouraging apartments, so it's, but it.
Absolutely, and that goes back to having a goal of maintaining a healthy balance between owner-occupied and rental in Monona.
I agree, and we've kind of covered that, and as long as we don't contradict it, I think we'll probably be all right.
On the, here we've got picture, what was it as far as the choice of pictures?
An old one and a new one.
Okay, but we've got condominiums, and we've got some rentals, but we don't show anything for condominiums. all four rental properties.
No, the one on the right, on the top is the Woodlands, that's a condominium.
Oh, you're right, sorry. But then, if we show an old apartment, should we show a new apartment and move the condo down and, I don't know what you, just, if it's not important to others, it just struck me.
Heritage is not, well, it just, I think what you're saying is under, with rentals should be rental properties and with condos should be condos. Heritage is neither.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it's.
Yeah, I guess
It goes
last
to the
two-
next page with
yeah.
senior housing.
And then,
Yeah.
why would we want to show
Kinda hard
something
to
old?
see.
Why don't we
Because
show,
we're talking about rehabilitating or redeveloping older multifamily developments.
okay.
Well, that qualifies.
Ryan, your list?
Yes. The photos, the only thing that I indicated was, do we want before and afters of the same properties or not? But I'll leave it at that. You can decide. On page 29 underneath senior housing.
Can we stay on 2.8 for a
Oh,
second?
I'm sorry. Yep.
Under the rentals, we talk about a national demand, blah, 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 and due to the age of construction, new multifamily has increased. Could we just, instead of talking about the land use elements, say that we're going to encourage mixed use? Could we just talk about the city would like to encourage the rehabilitation and rehab of its extensive rental housing stock? Something along those lines, that what we're really would love to do is fix, we have so much, and you made a point of it in the earlier charts of its age and everything, I think that would be a nice thing to see under rentals, is we'd really like to encourage the rehab and redevelopment of those areas. Would that make sense? See nodding.
Yes.
Anything more on 2.8?
Sorry.
No problem. 2.9, where are you going now, Brian?
2.9 underneath senior housing. My suggestion was to delete the first sentence and start with, as the proportion of older adults in Monona continue to increase, and get rid of "and age." The demand for diversity and types of affordability of senior housing will continue. Grow, I don't think goes with this. I think it's the wrong term to use, because we're talking about, I think, increasing the number of them, not the size. And then, and age, I'm concerned about, I'll just skip why, but my suggestion would be to delete it. I'll leave it at that.
I'm fine with rewording it. The idea behind it is that the baby boomers they're not all in one age group. There are some that are on the tail end that are already aged, and there are a lot that are coming.
What do you mean already aged? Come on now.
That's why
There's
I
a lot
got
of
rid
good years
aged.
Holy
I was trying to help you out.
We can just delete that.
Continuing to do so.
Charles, your turn.
The only other thing on this page was underneath section 811. Are we going to have more information?
There's a bullet point. That's just.
I can add more.
It seems, well, all right, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Anything else on 2.9, folks? Brian?
I think if I understood my note here, it seems like table 210. Should public housing go with the previous federal housing resource bulleted list, and really the table comes after that, or is it placed there because it is relating to the stuff above but not public housing?
No, I can switch the two. I think it was a result of reformatting.
Just the formatting? Okay. Other than that, that page looked great.
Anything more in 2.10? 2.11?
The Renew Monona Loan Program, I wonder if, I think some of the order of it might be out, and we want to indicate the what and the why first, and then the who, and then the how. Right now, some things I think are just mixed up. So for example, the last two sentences, I wonder if they are really the lead-in sentences about the primary goal of the program includes rejuvenation of existing and aging housing stock. That whole thing is really the lead-in of why and what this program is. And then there's information about who it's available for and then how it's administered. And two small edits were halfway through. It starts with loans. I think it should be loans were initially funded through the use of TIF funds from the closing of a TIF district within the city.
Well, that's going to continue.
It's going to continue, but the original loan, well, yeah, I suppose you're right. That loans will be not, then it wouldn't be initially. Loans will be funded.
Well,
so I don't know if
Say funding comes from a TIF district and it's revolving.
But then it'll self-fund because they'll cycle through. The loans will be repaid and will be
then I wonder if it really should be then loans were initially funded through the use of a TIF funds from the closing of a TIF district.
How about loans are initially being funded through the use? Because it has been and will continue for us. So loans are initially being funded through the use of TIF funds?
It started that way. I think council, we approved some monies for this round just to keep it alive until the closing out of the, what is it, TIF what? 2? When TIF 2 closes, there'll be a healthy number, so.
So maybe there's a way to, and maybe we don't need to get that specific. But that's the how, I guess, how it's administered. The only thing in the mixed-use development is right above the word gradually. Right now it's but, and I think it's by. I know now that's getting picky, I know.
Yes.
And that was it on that page.
Any other comments on this page?
Yes. Mixed-use development, that last sentence, can we say some increased density can also be facilitated by mixed use?
You changed gradual to some before, I don't know.
Yes, we did.
Let's change it here.
Further comments? 212.
I have none. Look great.
Oh, hey.
I'd like to add a goal. I'd like to add a goal that we try to maintain a healthy balance between owner-occupied and rental properties in the city. And then perhaps we can come up with a couple objectives, but certainly one would be to concentrate on rehabilitation, redevelopment of existing multifamily areas, also concentrate on denser single-family housing developments where appropriate, where we can do it, try to encourage more owner-occupied units when we do our mixed-use buildings. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that to try to maintain a healthy ratio. But it would be, I think, a good goal for the city with where we're at right now.
So it's big goal 2.3.
Whichever one Stoney wants to make it.
Other comments? Thank you very much. We will move to 5B, review of the community survey results for the comprehensive plan. Sonia.
We received 226 responses. So lower than.
Is that good or bad?
That's horrible. That's horrible.
Really low.
When we were reviewing how to exactly administer the survey, I had some parameters where we would be able to get a representative sample of the community with 366 responses, which is like a 95% confidence level. with a margin of error of 5 points. So with 226 responses, the margin of error is bigger. But also point out that it really varies between each of the questions. So on question 1, for example, we got 218 responses, but on question 8, we got 93. So the confidence for different questions, it just changes. It's still beneficial for a number of reasons. I think, like for example, 35% of the people that responded have lived in Monona for less than 5 years, and I talked to a few people that really appreciated the opportunity to do the survey, and they passed it along to all of their new families that moved into their neighborhood, and they were really excited to have the opportunity to provide input. It's not statistically reliable sample. It gives us good input and some interesting comments on various topics, and it can be compared to past surveys generally to see how things are changing, but.
Typical surveys, what was the last survey we did? What percentage response did we get? Do you remember? I don't.
Well, the strategic plan survey got about 500 responses, but I think I don't know if it's difficult to say what that percent response rate is because you're not handing out mailed copies. So it's kind of like, well, if 3,000 people saw it, we would have like 12% response rate.
Any comments on?
So under age, it says 23% were age 5 to 59. Is that a different range? Or is it 5 to 59? Or is that 45 to 59?
I think it should be 45 to 59 or some other number than 5.
Yeah,
but I'll
maybe
check.
40 to 59. That's probably it. But
Okay.
Probably 40.
Probably 40.
Any other comments?
There were some typos, I know.
Brian?
Yeah, Box.
Minor. Underneath families, is the 24.5 response had specifically 2 kids, or is that 1 or more children?
Specifically 2 children. I just picked out, there was a smaller percentage of people that had 3, 4.
You're showing the highlights. So that probably is 50 to 59 for that one group then. They don't add up to 100, so you just picked out the highest percentages of respondents in different categories to show who was answering.
And I think for other sections it might make a lot of sense, and so in families maybe it's just with kids or without kids, rather than picking the number of kids.
The percentage just have children.
So 54 had no children and 46 had children?
Yeah, well, I don't,
Or just
I'm not sure of
54%?
why we would want to call out
2 kids versus
2 kids.
1 or 3.
Because it was one of the largest groups responding, I suppose. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Who's responding?
I don't have a, 54% had no kids, the rest did, but to show the percentage that had more than one, I don't know.
But it
That was
isn't
the
more
highest-
than 1, it's 2.
Oh,
Unless that's what it really means, is more than 1.
It's 2.
It's exactly 2, not 2.1.
I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
okay. Anything else on 2.1? You want to go through this page by page, or are there,
Very minor stuff on here.
go ahead, sir.
So I can even just give it to Tony afterwards.
That- I
I
don't
don't
have,
think there's anything
are
of
there objections
content.
to that?
No. I think this is nice to see, but I don't think you can, like Sonia said, you can't take it to the bank.
No,
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
Also just pointing out too, and I guess a question, I sent this afternoon the actual responses that I copied directly from the website, and those are interesting to read through. Again, you
I
can't
bet they
take
are.
them to the bank. In the existing comprehensive plan that we have, actually, I take that back. In the existing comprehensive plan we have, it's just a summary like this. So this would go in as an appendix, and we might want to say that it's not statistically significant.
I think we should.
But it's interesting. In other plans, like the housing plan, they actually have some pages where they include all the word-for-word comments. You don't want to do that, I can see.
No.
Okay, just the summary.
I think if somebody's interested in that, they can contact City Hall and see if they can get a copy.
Okay. That's all.
Okay, item number 7, reports of staff and commission members. Staff report regarding status of development project proposals.
Sounds like the housing element's coming back one more time? Or do you prefer to look at the edits when we look at everything together?
Say that again.
I wasn't clear if we've approved the housing element as a draft to come back again when the whole plan is a draft, or if you want to see it individually one more time.
With the rest of it is fine with me.
With the rest of it is fine with me.
Me too.
We have an open house on May 20th. This is the CDA's open house for the riverfront redevelopment plan. This is May 20th at the community center at 5:30. Vanderwall and Associates will be there to answer questions and give brief presentations. The CDA will be there to answer questions. They have seen this plan, the concept plan, and all of the details and financing that goes with it. And the council has seen it as well too. So this is the public revelation of the plan.
We haven't seen this yet, have we?
No, just the general use description in the redevelopment area plan came to Plan Commission. So Plan Commissioners are encouraged to attend that meeting.
Is that the only way we're going to be able to get to see it, is to go to the open house?
Apparently.
It's still very conceptual. The CDA hasn't actually voted on it yet, so it being a plan that the CDA developed, I don't think they've been ready to bring it for critique. Public hasn't seen it yet either. So that's May 20th. May 25th is our next Plan Commission meeting, and that's on, it's on Memorial Day, so we won't have a meeting. Right now I don't have any applications, so if okay with you, I'd cancel it.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, I'd like to meet.
Can you schedule a meeting for Mr.
Library's
Hamburger?
open, Chris.
Please, please.
So some other applications that we have out there, Summit Credit Union on Monona Drive, they've received a summary of the comments from Plan Commission, but they're taking their time, they're not in a rush, so they're still considering the comments that Plan Commission gave them. Schluter Park was, the improvements there were delayed, but still pending final approval by Plan Commission regardless. I mentioned that Gates Auto Body purchased the property out on Royal Avenue near Veridian, and I just received a brief note from them saying that the project's on hold for a while. So status of that project. Tipsy Cow at Salad Creations also received a note from them that the deal was dead. I'm not sure if that was between the applicant and the current owner, but they're not pursuing that location anymore. Also received contact from Kevin Newell today and late last week, looking to set up a meeting. It sounds like site control is not yet achieved, but has some updates for us. The Qdoba building in front of the hotel, they'll need to come back with signage. Just a note that the Tresta and the Water restaurant opened today, if you wanted to go check that out. Now that housing and
What's the name of the restaurant?
Waypoint Public House.
Right, that is open. That's
Is it
what you're
open
referring
today?
to?
Yes.
I think they had a soft opening last week. There were some invites to folks. And
On the comprehensive plan, the land use subcommittee met once, and I think we'll be ready to do that again. We've been working on the a draft of the map and also these other elements once those are out of the way. So that again was to create a future land use map and make sure that everything's consistent with our zoning map. So that is the next step on the comprehensive plan. We have 2 elements left, which is the community facilities and utilities element and then implementation.
thank you. 7B, Plan Commission request for information concerning development projects. Seeing none, move to item number 8.
Move adjournment.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.